April Tony, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
Good. Well,
How are you?
let's be honest. You're here talking with me. Something's got to be wrong, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
this particular topic. I'm doing great, but man, I'll tell you what. I've been friends with you for a little while on Facebook, and I always admired how you just like the family proclamation. I was there for it, right? Like when I first became a Mormon, that came out that year, right? I was in the LDS church that time it came out, and I was like, well, this is kind of a no-brainer, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then now, like 20 some years later, I'm like, oh, apparently it's not a no-brainer. So,
Yeah.
and as I've seen you
Oh,
guys
it'll be
get,
30 years this year.
what's that?
It'll be 30 years this year. It was 95, it's 2025.
Wow,
Yeah.
you're
Wow.
right. I
30
did
years.
not need that reminder. Holy cow. Um, no. So yeah, I've been following what's been happening to you guys. It's nuts. So, are you
Yeah.
guys doing okay? I mean,
We're fine. The only thing that is hurting is, it's a financial burden, which I mean, it was intended to be that way. So
yeah.
it,
Un Unfortunately, that's the truth, right? Oftentimes, when it comes to lawsuits, if someone can outspend you, they just bank on you settling, right?
right.
And
I
so
think I
it's
think this person thought that we wouldn't do anything. We would just accept it so that we wouldn't have to pay, which I think most people would. But
right.
for me, the principle of the matter, I couldn't do that. And luckily, I have a husband who's very supportive, and we're gonna make it work financially.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Why don't you take us through the whole story here? What happened? Let's fill in the audience here on what happened.
So it started in January of 2021. My kids were in public school in Murray City School District, Utah, and I found out. I think it was January 8th, 2021. I My son came home from school and a neighbor texted me and she was like, "Did you hear what happened at school today? They read this book." Like, my daughter came home saying that they read this book about how to change your gender. And, in the book, it says parents made a mistake. And like, I was like, what? I was absolutely shocked because, I figured like in this is a part of our world. My kids are going to have to face these realities that people believe this kind of stuff, but I thought it would be like in junior high from their peers. I
Right.
was absolutely shocked that it was my son's third grade teacher. These are a class of 8-year-olds, and she's teaching this as if it's truth to all these little kids. So, at that point, I started looking into what was going on and asking questions. I emailed the teacher and the principals, and they were basically like, we don't answer to you. We do what we want. And here's our district memo. And here's how we have permission. And at that point, I was like, no, 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 that's not how this is going to go. And I started looking into the laws and figuring out what I could do to fight it. And I wrote this long email citing these different Utah codes around like teaching sexuality and whatever, those kind of issues, and how parents are supposed to have knowledge of what's going on, and they're supposed to receive parental consent. And I sent that. It was this big long email at like 1 a.m. I sent it to the principals and the superintendent, and I was like, either this gets fixed or I'm taking action, basically a legal threat. And so
Right.
at that point, the next day, they were all just calling me and saying, let's talk about this, let's work on it. And I got a lawyer on the phone with me and my husband, and we basically went over the codes, and we said, this is not within the legal rights that you have. Although they definitely made their arguments. Like the HR guy, he said, well, this isn't sexuality, it's gender identity. So this doesn't fall under the code. It's not a, and I was like, what? So I had to, at that point, I was like praying, like, God, help me to know how to take on this fight, because technically you could say gender identity isn't sexuality, although I think they're so interconnected that you can't really separate them. But that was their argument. And I do feel like God answered that prayer. He helped me to realize, even in that phone call, I felt inspired to compare reading this book about this transgender kid. I said, would you ever read a book to my child's third grade class about what it means to be a Mormon? Would you ever explain to them, oh, here's how the Holy Ghost feels, and here's how you identify as a child of God? And maybe your parents made a mistake if they taught you that you weren't a child of God. Like, that just came to me in that phone call. I mentioned it and I'm like, I know you wouldn't. You would never teach that. So why are you teaching this stuff that's essentially a belief system to this class of 8-year-olds? And, they agreed to shut down this equity book bundles program, although they denied that there was any LGBTQ content in it. They ended up claiming that a student brought in the book, but I submitted thousands of dollars worth of grammar requests and got all these emails and all these meeting notes and found that, in fact, this content was part of the books. I got an email where the vice principal was ordering this insane book called, oh, what is it called? It Feels Good to Be Yourself. If you look up that book, it's this little storybook about like this child was two genders and this child was no gender and this child was transgender, and it just goes and teaches all these doctrines about gender ideology. I have an email of the vice principal ordering 4 copies of that book for the book program, yet they still denied to me, oh no, this was not part of the book program at any time. So they were just liars, and it was a crazy situation, but I did everything I could to fight it.
And then what ended up happening after that, April?
The school district lied. They had this school board meeting in February of 2021. So, like a few weeks after that incident had happened, the principal from my child's school got up. She told her little story about what happened. It wasn't accurate. The whole school board like played along. I was like watching this whole meeting, like I was so confused. Now I know it's, I was being gaslit. And they didn't intend to fix anything. When we got the grandma request back with our emails, it was like Doug Perry, who was the communications director. He was just like, okay, we're watching the news. This is what they're saying. What can we do to fix this narrative? It wasn't anything about like what's best for the kids, what's going on with the parents, how can we help them feel better. They didn't care at all about that. It was only their public what do you call that, image. Yeah. Only their public image that they were worried about. And so I ended up just withdrawing my kids from Murray School District, and we started homeschooling after that because I couldn't trust that school district, and they didn't care about making things better for parents. All they cared about was their image. And unfortunately in Murray, Utah, it's a very progressive area nowadays, and all of Salt Lake City is, I think. And
she took it up to all the people she should have taken it up to, and nothing changed. So what does she do? She's pregnant, right? You're pregnant, or you just had a kid, and you ran for school board.
Oh yeah. So that was in 2021 when that started. And I was pregnant in 2021, and I had my last baby in January 2022. And then I turned in the papers to run for school board. I think it was February of 2022. It was a crazy wild ride, but I really did every single thing that I could to try to enact change in my community. And it was just really hard. It was really hard.
What about other parents? Did other parents come out in support of what you were saying, or did you feel like it was just you guys?
A few did. Like, we formed a parent group. We called it the Murray Parents' Rights Council. And I had so there's one mom, her name's Laurel Fetzer. She lives 2 streets. Well, she did live 2 streets over from me. And she was a huge help. She actually stood up. She ran for state school board the year that I ran for local school board. And so we formed a little parent group, maybe like 40 parents or so that were really, but it was mainly like me and Laurel really doing the majority of the work, and the other parents, a lot of parents, like a lot of times they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm rooting for you. Great job. Like whispering to you behind closed doors. But when it comes time to get in the public arena, they don't want to do it because, like, as I've endured, you are targeted, you are harassed, you are mocked, you are, just treated like crap all over the place. And they don't want that on them. So they'll quietly say they support you, but they won't really stand with you publicly. And it's funny. Yeah, it's a hard thing. A lot of them will like watch you take the heat and then they'll criticize you when they don't think you're doing it right. And I'm like, sit down until you stand up and put yourself on the chopping block. Don't you dare come and criticize me for how I'm doing it. It makes me super mad, but you just do what you got to do, you know?
Absolutely. So when did the harassment from officials start for you? What did that look like?
What do you mean, officials?
I'm trying to do this so your lawyer won't be mad at me.
Oh,
Um, wasn't and I can edit this a little later. Wasn't there school board officials that ended up kind of harassing you or
so
coming to your
she's the
house?
PTA president. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so in November 2022, I did end up losing the election, and my opponent won. Who she had, even though she claimed to believe, she's a member of the church, goes to my same stake, lives basically across the street. Um, she claimed to believe everything we believed, but she took the endorsement of the Equity Alliance and all these groups that stand for exactly what is opposite of what our religion teaches, but whatever, for political gain, people do whatever. They'll compromise their values, apparently. But so I lost the election in November 2022. And at that point, it was kind of like this double-edged sword because I was sad that I lost. Like I wanted to win and throw it in the face of those people who had mocked me all through my campaign. But at the same time, had I won, Murray School District had already written a policy where they intended to control and silence me. And so by not winning, it kind of freed my voice. Like I no longer had to be bound by like, oh, I have to always be professional, I have to always be polite, I have to always be this way. And I was like, I'm letting loose. Like I've taken so much heat over this past year and I've been nothing but respectful and polite. So, I'm going to hold my ground now, like out the door with this politeness. And that's when I started really exposing the issues hardcore in Murray School District. And I would just like try to get it out as far and wide as I could. And I think Murray School District was really like, oh man, we thought we had it in the bag when she lost her election. Like now she'll shut up. And that's not what happened. It was around this time that a volunteer from Murray School District started harassing us. She showed up on my Facebook page and began like mocking our family and mocking my religion and mocking that I had lost the school board. She mentioned like a personal family issue where there had been abuse and there was kind of like a rift in my husband's family over it because we were saying that abuse was wrong and they were saying, oh, it's fine, it wasn't egregious. And so she came onto my Facebook page and was like mocking all of that issue. And we were like, how does she know any of this about us? And, we kind of had some back and forth and almost.
She used verbiage that was pretty specific. Like she had been talking to people to find out my family situation. So it was obvious she was stalking us to get personal hurtful information.
So right. So she's like doing deep dive kind of research into your family to try to make you guys look bad.
Right, exactly. And that was kind of what really bothered me about it because I get trolled all the time, and I constantly get like harassed for my religion and because I lost the school board and whatever, like same old, same old. But this piece of gossip about our family was really like, I was like, wow, you are very invested in my husband and me. And so we did the back and forth on Facebook. And almost from the get-go, she was telling me, like, I'm here to defend Murray School District teachers. They can't defend themselves, so I'm going to defend them. And I've worked at this in the PTA, and I know these teachers. And so she, from the get-go, was basically saying she was working as a representative of Murray School District, and which now she's tried to distance herself from that. But so and then also she almost immediately was saying like, I'm gonna sue you and I have so much money and I'm gonna come after you legally, so you better lawyer up and you better have a good one. Like those were her.
Just wait to see how much money we can spend on lawyers.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so we basically were just like, leave us alone, psycho and whatever. And then then on May 28th, 2023, we had some people show up in our front yard, and they just were pounding in stakes into our grass and putting up pride flags. And luckily I happened to be sitting in the front room. I was about to write an email, and I see these people pull up and park in front of our house. And I'm like, what? Maybe they're going to the neighbors. But then when they walked into our yard and started hammering stuff, I told my husband, like, grab your phone, record, because we've been dealing with this psychopath for the past week, and I just figured it might be related to that. So I kind of like gathered my kids and got them out of the situation, like downstairs, so they wouldn't be affected by it. And my husband went out and recorded, and yeah, it was her. She was sending 7 pride flags to be staked into our front yard as a mockery to our religious beliefs and on everything we had stood for the past 2 years at that point, pretty much. Yeah.
Holy cow. And then when I assume you tried to make contact with her about this, right?
My method of dealing with this kind of stuff is just posting about it, posting to the public.
Sure.
Because when you expose things, that it usually makes it stop, because nobody wants exposure for their bad behavior. So I posted it and shared what she was doing to our family, and
the police wouldn't do anything.
Yeah. At that point, the police hadn't gotten
involved. Isn't it vandalism at some point?
It is. Sorry, you can edit out me like itching my stupid eyes.
No, you're doing fine.
It is. It's vandalism. It's trespassing. We've read the laws. We know, but the police were like, it's not trespassing. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to tell you. And they were just biased, the same as everyone else. They were biased against my religious beliefs, and so they wouldn't protect us. But I exposed it, and within 3 minutes of me posting about it, this PTA volunteer shared it. And she was like, look at happy pride to our favorite Murray citizen, April Despain. And I mean, she was totally proud of it. She just was like mocking us and taking credit for it. And she was proud of it. So yeah, that's what happened and that's how it all kind of got started.
Jeez. And nothing from the school board on this, right? Like, look, if the school board made an honest mistake, I get that, right? Apologize. We got one activist teacher here. It's been dealt with. But like when a PTA volunteer comes after you, right? You would expect Murray to do something to be like, hey, not our people. Did the school board ever come out and say, hey, we just want you to know we're not with this or anything like that?
Nope, not at all. They just, I mean, I can only assume, I can't say that they supported that type of thing, but I don't think that they were ever going to make a statement against it, because they did not want to show any support for me. I had exposed so many issues in Murray School District. I had evidence of their communications director, Doug Perry, reporting my posts on Facebook. He was following me.
Reporting to who?
Just where you report it so that it
to the Facebook police.
Right, yeah, to the Facebook police, so that it will like either turn it off or whatever, make it so it doesn't get follows, or I don't know what it does to it. But I had evidence, like I had seen that he was following my posts and reporting them over and over again. And this is a Murray School District. He works for the school district. And then when all this started happening with his PTA president, I had to go submit a grandma request to see how involved Murray School District was with this whole flag incident. And I requested her emails for like maybe a month or a week of the school year, during the week of what all this stuff had happened to me. And Doug Perry, he contacted her. I believe he contacted her because we got the grandma request back. So look, first of all, the grandma was denied. And
because you wanted the emails.
Right. I wanted her emails with anyone in Murray School District through like May 2023. And so it was denied. And in their denial, they have to explain why they're denying this request. And the denial cited these codes. I went through and read the codes, and they were saying things like, this person's life would be in danger. if you were to receive her emails, or her safety is on the line. Like these ridiculous things that I'm like, her life is not in danger. I've never done anything of a violent nature. They know that I've never been violent, but it was clear that they were playing along with this whole stalking injunction that she had filed. And they used that as a way to try to get me from receiving the evidence that I needed for my case. And anyway, I got some legal help involved and appealed the denial, and I ended up getting them, which was great because it showed that she had ordered those pride flags for me before any engagement online had even begun. So clearly she was following me. She was like harassing me before I didn't even know who she was. I didn't even know that she existed. So yeah, it was
Before
really
she
good.
even made one comment on Facebook, she had already ordered the pride flags.
Yeah, and it was actually a blessing in disguise that he had denied the grandma, because I had to resubmit the grandma, and then I got his email with her about her injunction, and so I have now evidence of how the school district was also using the injunction to silence me and to limit my abilities to expose the issues in Murray School District and in this case. So it's definitely going to be an issue for them that they've done that. It will be.
Gotcha. So do you feel like this PTA volunteer was do you think she was in cahoots with the school district?
I think that she thought she was going to be a hero for the school district. Like she's, as she said from the beginning, like, I know these teachers, they are great people and they need someone to defend them, and I'm going to do it. I can't point definitively to the school saying that they asked her to do it. I think she, of her own accord, probably did it and thought she was going to be this great big hero for the school district. Um, but I think once she got herself into that mess, the school district wasn't going to like hang her out to dry. So that's why the whole incident with the grandma request happened. I think they were like, well, we're going to help you because, it benefits Murray School District if I'm labeled a stalker. So if this injunction is held up and I'm labeled a stalker, then that damages my credibility as someone who exposes Murray School District's issues. So it is, whether or not they asked her to do anything, that after the fact, they clearly had motivation to say, let's help her out, help out this PTA volunteer so that April can, just shut up or somehow lose credibility, and that'll help everyone in this situation except April. So I don't believe, or at least I don't have evidence that they asked her to do anything, but I do believe that once it happened, they were helping. They were working together on that.
It's so I won't mention the names, right? I know that there's litigation pending and it's there's some stuff here that prevents us from saying this person's name. But I do my homework and I do my research, right? So I went ahead and I was like, let's just see who this person is. And judging by their Facebook, they're definitely advocating, right? I mean, they've got some slants that might fly in the face of what your beliefs are and what my beliefs are. And that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. You can, like, you do you, bro. I have no issues, right? But when you use that platform to then persecute a family, that's a little different. And using that position, right? To me, as I read through it, and I want to be clear, I am not putting words in April and Tony's mouth. This is my estimation of it. She was a strong arm in there, right? Like, and we have to remember that this is like 2022, 2023, right? The certain political entities felt emboldened to shut down those who they disagreed with, right? I think it might be a little harder right now to get that done from our side of the spectrum, but in those days it wasn't, right? And they were coming with the full weight of everything they could muster to get it done. And that sort of stuff makes my blood boil. Tony, where are you at through all this? I mean, I can only imagine what it's like watching your wife have to fight this battle, dude.
Yeah, it's hard to see people attacking her online, there's sometimes I'd want to get on there and say stuff,
Oh
and
yeah.
it probably wouldn't have been good. So she's she's probably a lot more reserved, or she holds
Diplomatic.
back better than I would, I think,
Right.
because sometimes I would say things and you know get myself in trouble or get her in trouble because I'm her husband. And
Right.
so yeah, it's not easy seeing her get attacked and being ostracized at your own in your own ward for views that everybody should have, or you think everybody in your ward should have, but I felt very ostracized in my own ward, so it was crazy.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's someplace I wanted to go. What was the support from your local leaders at church like? I mean, were they rallying to your support? I mean,
It felt like they didn't want to have eye contact with us if we walked down the hall sometimes.
uh,
uh
I think I would say it depends on the leader because, like,
yeah,
sure.
there were some that were supportive, but
yeah, like there was. I mean, you like in Murray, there was a member of our stake presidency who was flying pride flags, and he wore a pride flag in his pocket every week to every church meeting, stake conference, whatever. He always wore it. Um, and I loved him. Like, I love him as a person. I don't think it's right that he's promoting those ideologies, especially as a church leader at church. But I'm sure that he's not going to agree with my stand on the family proclamation and whatever. And that's just the reality down there. And we had bishopric members who were flying pride flags, and then we had like bishopric members who were saying, "Great job, I totally support you." So it really depended on the leader, but it was very, like, it was clearly something that, like, people were just kind of like, don't want to touch that, don't want to go there, and you kind of feel like even if they privately supported you, in public they're like, ooh, don't want to go there because it's so divisive and I want to be a peacemaker. And
yeah, it was the elephant in the room. I felt like sometimes to talk about the family proclamation at church. There were definitely leaders who supported us, and they invited us to speak on what we were going through at church. But
Nice.
then there were others who were like, we got to have someone else speak to go after them because
yeah, I wouldn't say that they invited us to speak on what we were going through. They just
that's
asked
true.
us to speak.
But it was
And
on a topic that was very, very related to what she was going through. I
right,
mean,
and I did happen to mention the stuff that I had gone through a little bit. And then the next Sunday, they had this super progressive member of our ward get up, actually, two of them get up and speak on their progressive beliefs. And they were like, what did he say? He said, um, Jesus was a
disruptor.
disruptor. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he said Jesus was a disruptor. And he just was basically implying, like, if Jesus were here, he'd be a disruptor and he'd support this LGBTQ community. And I was just like, I wrote a post about it after that talk because I'm like, yeah, Jesus was a disruptor and he still is. And that's why the family proclamation will get you more hate. You want to fly a pride flag? Everybody pats you on the back. You
Mhm.
can go to your parties all the month of June. Like, have at it. You
Right.
fly the family proclamation. Oh, watch the death threats come on in. And I've had them.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
you want to talk about being a disruptor. That's what the family proclamation is. I just think it's hilarious, these church members who think they're like on top of the game, and they're just making fools of themselves as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I could totally, unfortunately, I could totally see that. And Utah, of all places, right? Like that
Yeah.
should be the stronghold, right? Like
It should be,
every
but it's
other
so
every
not.
other place around there should be like being able to flirt with that and feel kind of safe. But in Utah, you would think, no, 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 no. You're close to church headquarters. You better kind of toe the line on this, right?
Mhm.
And look, that dude is not wrong, right? That Jesus was a disruptor. He's absolutely a disruptor, but not quite in the way that I think he's figuring it would go, right?
Mhm.
Right.
And this thing about being a peacemaker, I I take exception with that a little bit because while certainly Jesus wants us to be united on things, unity within itself is not a great thing. And let me explain, right? as Mormons, we strive for Zion, right? We want that people of one heart and one mind. But being of one heart and one mind around incorrect principles will bring disaster. And you only have to look to the Tower of Babel in that, right? If we go back to Genesis and we look, the Lord's very clear there, right? He says the people are united and nothing will be kept from them. So what does he do? He confuses their language so they're not united anymore. So unity for unity's sake, I cannot get behind. The other thing I'd say, even Jesus, the Prince of Peace, overturned a few tables and drew a whip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing he said was, you know, think not that I've come, can't remember how he said it.
Bring peace. I bring the sword of.
Yes, that's exactly right. You know,
Right.
daughter, mother against daughter, father against son, brother against brother, right? So he's very much understanding that, hey, there is a line and that line is the truth. And if you're going to flirt with that line, there's going to be divisions that happen, right? And so
let's look at the Book of Mormon and all the
The wars.
Ammon and Captain Moroni and all the wars. There's a boundary you got to set sometimes.
absolutely
I don't have an issue with peacemaker.
right.
I think that the issue is that people misinterpret what it means to be a peacemaker. People think that if they avoid conflict, then they're peacemakers, and that's not true. Peace, like, nothing will bring more chaos. If you ask me, nothing will bring more chaos to this world than the gender ideology that they're pushing on our kids. The Family Proclamation shows us the way to have peace. God showed us the way. And when you defend truth and you defend true principles, you're making peace. If you turn a blind eye in order to avoid conflict, and then the ultimate result is, hey, these ideologies are running the show, that's chaos. That's the opposite of peace. I just think it's sad how many church members don't understand on a fundamental level what peacemaking really is. And I know that I'm a peacemaker. Like, I don't need to go to church and have my church neighbors or whatever tell me that I'm a peacemaker. I look to God, and I know that what I do is ultimately peacemaking. Just like, Ammon, people just want to focus on, like, but look, when he talked to Lamoni, he was peacemaking. Well, was he not peacemaking when he scattered those people?
Yeah.
Just to protect,
defended the flocks. Yeah.
Right. Like, we need to look at everything as a whole and recognize what peacemaking really is, because we're not going against the prophet's counsel when we stand up for truth and people get mad. Them getting mad, that's their issue. That doesn't mean that I'm not making peace. And the same goes for so many situations, like when someone stands up for what's right and it causes contention in the hearts of others. That doesn't mean that I'm causing contention. That means that maybe they need to realign themselves with truth. That's their issue, not mine.
Yeah, and look, the scriptures even say there's a time for peace and a time for war, right? And even if, you know what, I'm not sure I wouldn't have embraced being like, yeah, you're right. I'm not a peacemaker at the moment. I'm here to take names and plant my foot where it needs to go, right? Yeah, no, that's craziness. And so through this all, right, when the lawsuit comes up, what are you guys thinking? I mean, do you remember the day that you're served papers or something like that?
I do.
Yeah. It was July 3rd, 2023 that we got the papers, and I was just like, okay, here we go. Like, it's annoying in that, okay, now I have to hire an attorney and then we're going to have to pay attorney's fees. But I never, at any time, I never intended to back down. I never will. So it's annoying, but it is what it is. You got to go through what you got to go through. And you just trust that if you're doing what God wants you to do, he's going to help you through it.
Yeah. So. And she's a lot better at that than I am. Sometimes I'm like, how are we going to pay for stuff? And she's reminded me, we need to have faith that God's going to help us out. We're doing what he wants us to do. So things are going to work out. Don't don't stress about it.
Right.
It's easier said than done, but it
Sure.
is taking a step into the darkness, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What'd your kids think, right? Because April, you said you ended up being like, okay, I gotta get my kids out of you, and good for out of here, and good for you for doing that, right?
Mhm.
What was your kids' reaction to all this?
Well, we tried. First of all, I was devastated to remove them from Murray School District. My husband and I both grew up in Murray. You know, I was like a third generation Murray citizen, and I had a lot of history there. I knew most of the community. Um, and I was devastated. Plus, they were in the Spanish program, which I majored in Spanish. I love Spanish. So I cried for weeks taking them out. They like at that point, we only had two kids in public school. We have six kids, but they're so little, or they were so little at that time. Um, I would say that my oldest, he was a little sad about like some of the friends, but
Hmm.
that he wasn't going to see as much. We tried a charter school for a month, and then we just ended up feeling like homeschool was the way that we needed to go. And they loved it. They loved homeschool, you know. But as far as the issues, we try not to bring them into the issues as much. They do kind of know what's going on. And when I ran for school board, there were some emotional moments, and like there were times when my husband gave me blessings, and my kids were there for that. And but we try not to bring them into, you know, they're kids. We try to like shelter them from it, and I hope that what they do witness, they're realizing like, wow, when these issues come up, I need to take a stand. Like we're hopefully setting an example for them, that you don't just turn a blind eye and let everyone else go through it, or let one or two other people go through it. You take a stand if you believe in something. And so that's my hope of what they're learning. But for the most part, we really try to keep them sheltered from it.
You know, I remember when me and my wife decided we were going to withdraw our kids out of public school and home teach them, right? First off, I was always the dude that was like, you never homeschool, right? Your kids are going to be weird, right? And then when I saw like
Same with me.
I had it, and it was something similar, not quite as bad, I want to say, but there was something similar that was going on, right out there where I had my kids out in Orem, right? Um,
Oh,
wh-
yeah.
where things were kind of going off the rails, right? And me and my wife agonized over this. We prayed about it a ton. You know, we have six kids as well, right? And we're like, okay, what are we going to do here? And as we prayed about, the spirit was take them out of school, right? You can do this yourself. And I remember my wife, she was like, I'm nervous about going in by myself to withdraw them. Would you go with me? I'm like, sure, I ain't got a problem with that, right? I'm blunt. I don't have an issue with that. And I went in, and I remember this school counselor. She's like, well, your kids are not going to fit into society. And I was like, in this society, your terms are acceptable.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, thank you. That's what we were hoping.
yeah, that's what we were hoping for. What's your experience been like homeschooling your kids?
It was good. We actually homeschooled for 3 years. So yeah, at this point, they're back in public schools, and the schools where they are now, and I'm not like stupid. I'm not going to think, oh, I'm in this area, so there's no problem.
Right.
But it's definitely not to the extent that it was down in Salt Lake City. Like in our when my kids were in elementary school at Murray, at first it wasn't this way, but once COVID hit, that's when everything kind of shifted. And
Right.
they wouldn't let me into the classrooms. They were like, nope, you can't go back. You might have COVID. And I'm like, I don't have COVID. I'm wearing a mask. Can I go back to my child's classroom and see what's going on? Nope, you can't go in the building. So I never even, that a whole school year, I never even saw their classrooms, but I found out from substitute teachers that there were pride flags in the classrooms. You know, I found out from teachers in the school that this whole LGBTQ curriculum was part of the equity book bundles, not to mention the race part of it. Like it's not just the gender ideology. They were teaching my kids that there's something wrong with them just because they were born with white skin. You know, like they're
Critical
reading these
race
books from
theory, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
from Ibram X. Kendi and Kimberly Crenshaw, who like she founded critical race theory. She founded the term. She founded intersectionality. Like I did my research, and then I looked into these equity book bundles, and I'm like, this is teaching all of this garbage about race and sexuality and gender. And but yeah, they wouldn't even let me go back and walk through the school. Whereas where we are now, they will let me walk through the school anywhere I want to, there's nothing, they're not hiding things from me. And like, I know that there's always going to be issues to some extent, but I've read the policies in the district where we are now, and I feel like they're definitely on the parents' side rather than like with Murray School District. It was like parents were the enemy. Parents were just in the way of the ideologies of these certain teachers who ran the district.
Mhm.
Did you ever get a chance to speak at any school board meetings or anything like that?
I did. I spoke at local and state. On the state level, I spoke all the time. So
What
yeah.
was what was the reception like there, both from the audience at large as well as the educators or the administrators?
Well, the audience, you'd always have like your opponents in the audience who'd be like they're recording or like they're going to take you down or whatever. But it was always, you just have to like ignore those people. They're always going to be there. And and I would have some of the parents with me who agreed with me, and it was fine. The school board, the local school board, they basically just nod their heads and then they're like, get out of here. They don't care. They don't do anything. On the state level, I'm sure a lot of people will, if you're in Utah, you've heard about some of the issues with the Utah State Board of Education and Natalie Klein and all that. It was like the state board, it's the same thing. They don't really care what you have to say. You'll have one or two people who care, but ultimately they're not going to listen. And actually, I had public comment when I was speaking at the state school board, I think in November, it was October of 2023, if I remember correct. But they like stopped me from giving my comment because I was criticizing who was my school board representative. She ran on the platform that she's queer, and I'm like, if she runs on the platform that she's queer, then I can talk about her being queer as my state board representative. So, I was addressing that issue and why she wouldn't stand up for our concerns and whatever. And they silenced me. They stopped my comment. And actually, we were working on a First Amendment lawsuit in that case, but because we moved, we weren't able to follow through with it. But we had a nonprofit who was on it at that time. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it like I spoke at at one school board meeting once. And I remember we were talking about giving the teachers a raise. Now, at this time, I was actually living in Western Idaho, and it was a fairly small area, but the small area had like 6 administrators, right? And I'm like, they were talking about, we need more money, we want to pass this bond. And I remember I asked the question like, I agree, maybe we should pay our teachers more, but we only have like 2 schools and we have 6 administrators. Why? Right? And each one of you make triple digits. Is that really, why don't we go there? And they're not too happy to hear from you in those circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I've often felt like when it comes to school board meetings is that it's not really a place to voice your dissent, right? They're gonna tell you you're up in the night and that sort of thing. Um, once you went to trial, how's that been going? What are the attorneys like? Who's the attorney representing the PTA volunteer?
Her attorneys are Kennedy Nate and Austin Nate from the Ray Quinney something.
Ray Quinney and Nebuchadnezzar. Two attorneys.
So she has 2 attorneys, and I don't know. Like, I've never looked into this firm, but apparently they're not cheap, so it can't be. It's got to be a lot of money for her. But I mean, they're just doing their. I don't know. Like, I'm of 2 thoughts because they're just doing their job on the one hand, but on the other, I believe that this case in and of itself is so unethical that an honest, ethical attorney would say, I can't take this. This is based on untruths or half-truths.
Deception.
Yeah, there's just so many parts of this injunction. It's very deceptive. I believe it's misleading the court. and I don't know if like I can say all that online, but that's a
Yeah.
fact. Like, and I have attorney friends who've seen it and they're like, I wouldn't take this case. If someone came to me with this, I would have to say this is unethical. I can't do it. So I just think, like many in Utah, especially among the church members, progressive church members, they have motive to take someone like me down. So they're like, yeah, we'll take this case. And they think that because they're some big law firm and they cost a lot of money, somehow that's, I guess they think that's going to intimidate me or something, or they think that that in and of itself will make them win. I don't know. But I'm just like, I have truth on my side. Ultimately, I can't lose. I might lose in the short term. Like, I don't know exactly how everything's going to go short term, but in the long term, I know I'm going to win, whether it's this life or the next. And I'm not worried about it. But, I just think it's amazing that there are people willing to defend such lies. And I think what they get from it, they deserve. So,
And it's almost like I wonder if they take it personal
right.
because of the way they harass her on the witness stand. It's like, are they taking it personal and they want to take out their angst towards April and attack her because they don't agree with her beliefs, even though they have the same beliefs?
Well, we're members of the same church. We don't
Right.
have the same
So,
beliefs.
yeah, they
But
should. But
it's like they're offended by me because I defend the beliefs of the church and they don't want to believe that their church actually teaches those things. They're harassing me on the stand, trying to get me using the family proclamation as impeachment evidence, which I just think it's crazy. You think you can impeach my testimony of the gospel, and he's a member of the church. And ultimately, it's just they make themselves look stupid and they get what they deserve because I'm not an attorney, but I can hold my own with any attorney. I may not know like the
case law.
procedural side of things, but as far as arguing, I can hold my own, especially when it comes to these issues. I know my stuff, and they do look stupid, in my opinion. They look really stupid in that courtroom. So it's funny, but it's also not funny, like the financial side of it. And
It's a waste of everybody's time and money.
right, yeah.
Right, your guys' money, right? Because you're the
Well,
ones that have to pay to defend yourselves, right? This other PTA volunteer seems to be fairly well off, right? Like she has the wherewithal to throw money at this, right? And it really sticks in my craw when they start using the law as a weapon and a crowbar, right? And that's what it really is, right? They want you to sit down, they want you to be quiet. They don't want and if you dare speak out against them, they're look, I'll be honest, just looking at it from the outside, they're trying to make an example of you, right? Do not speak out. Do not challenge us because we'll come down from on high and we'll find somebody with pockets deep enough to go after you, right?
Yep.
It it boggles my mind that your support of the proclamation of the proclamation on the family is this controversial, right? That is the tool, and this is something else I wanted to draw attention to, right? And I want to be clear on this. On this show, I have no axes to grind with the LDS Church. I enjoyed my time there, right? I felt like it prepared me for other things. I I really felt like my time was well spent there. However, I think it needs to be stated that things are not well in Zion, right? That and as I've looked back at this whole thing with the LGBTQ movement, I think that on a lot of our part, we have this idea that okay, they just want tolerance, right? And I'm sure a lot of them did. That's all they wanted. And we were willing to accommodate that. But there was another faction on that side that was playing to win. And sometimes I don't think we quite understood who our enemy was necessarily, right? We thought we could be like, sure, except, tolerance, I get it, right? I don't want anybody to suffer unduly, right? However, there's a right and there's a wrong, right? And you know what? We can be good neighbors without hugging it out on Sundays. And what I've seen from that side of the aisle a lot is they don't want just tolerance. They want someone to bow the knee and enfranchisement fully, right? And in this sort of a deal, there is way there the chasm that separates us is way too much, right? There's no other religion in all of Christianity that puts as much emphasis on mom and dad and kids as Mormonism does, right? And so to deny that is to deny a central tenet of your faith. And so the LGBTQ thing doesn't really hold water with the religion. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be mean to them, which I don't see you guys have ever done, but you guys certainly have stood your ground, and rightfully so, when they've kind of came after your kids, right? And that is very much the tactic, right? They know that, look, at our age, they know we're not bending at this point, right? They know who we are. So they go after the kids because they're still young and impressionable.
Right. I can make a comment here if you want.
Absolutely.
As far as I've discussed this before on another show, there's a reason that the word, because when I found out there were these equity book bundles in my kids' schools in 2020, I'm like, oh great, fine, whatever. I didn't really look into them, but I honestly thought that they were called the equality book bundles. Equality. And I was talking once this stuff started happening. I was talking to one of the moms in the school. She's like, the equity book bundles. I'm like, you mean the equality book bundles? She's like, no, equity. And I'm like, okay, what's that? So I'm like looking into it. And there's a reason that they're not using equality. They're using equity because it means we get lifted above.
Yep.
And like everything I had looked into with equity, it was like the people who are privileged, white people, Christians, straight, they need to sit on the back burner and let all the people who are on the outside of the intersectional wheel, all the persecuted or whatever, sit at the front. We all need to put our beliefs on the back burner and let this takes like center stage. And that's really what it was. And the US Constitution protects equality. It doesn't, there's nothing in there like it protects equity. So yeah, I agree in that way that is what was going on. And as I researched, like I watched, there was this conference called the Pride Not Prejudice Conference in Salt Lake City with they invited all Utah educators.
By the Pride Center, Utah Pride Center.
Yeah, put on by the Utah Pride Center. And the Murray District Equity Council presented, which I didn't even know they existed until this point. So this was January 2021. I watched this presentation by these people from my school district, and they're talking about the equity book bundles. And, there were like several presentations throughout this whole conference.
Murray teachers were presenting, right?
Yeah. So one of the presentations was from Murray teachers, but some of them, there was this lady named Kyle Myers, and she actually straight up said that they wanted to intergenerationally disrupt the values that were being transmitted from parents to children. It wasn't a hidden message. It was written on her slide.
She was the keynote.
She was the keynote speaker. She's this lady who she raises her child like with no genders. She's never revealed what her child's real gender is. And she's just, all in on this ideology. And
she's queer.
Yeah, she says she's queer. But so no, it's not even, they don't even hide it, that their goal is to disrupt the intergenerational values that are being transmitted from parents to children. They are trying to create a schism or chasm or whatever you want to call it between the parents and the children. And that is what was happening in my child's third grade classroom when his teacher read this book saying, you can change your gender. Your gender is like, you're not necessarily a male or a female. You're whatever you want to be. And if your parents tell you otherwise, they made a mistake. It straight up said your parents made a mistake in the book. So they are pitting children against their own parents. And that's just not okay under any circumstances. It's just not okay. You know, if a parent in their home wants to teach their child that he has no gender and he can switch whatever, I think that's baloney, but that's a parent's right to do that. If they want to teach their children that bullcrap, that's their right. But if I want to teach my child that he's a child of God and that his gender is immutable and it's eternal and it is a part of who he is as a spirit and it will never change, and no amount of changing your clothes or wearing makeup or whatever will change who you are as a son of God, that is my not only my right, but my responsibility. And no school system, no state system has the right to take that responsibility away from me or to step in there and break those generational values that I'm intentionally teaching my kids. And it was insane watching that conference. I was floored. And this is January 2021. I was like, at that time, I was terrified for my children on a spiritual level. And since that time, I've come to realize, like, I'm not helpless. I can stand up to these people. I can teach my children to stand up to these people. And we're going to do that. We're going to do everything we can. We're not helpless, you know?
Absolutely.
And God will strengthen us as we try to do our best. So
absolutely. You know who else pitted parents against, kids against their parents? The Nazis, right? And I'm not backing down from that. I'm anticipating the hate. To be honest, I do, I'm one of these days I'm going to make a
and so did
book out of my
Mao.
hate mail, right? But what's that? What'd you say? Sorry, Tony.
So did Mao. If you
Yeah,
listen to James Lindsay, he compares the Pride movement to Mao,
the Chinese Cultural Revolution.
the Cultural Revolution, and it's
intersectionality
is.
If you listen to Z Van Fleet, who went through it, and then you listen to like people from the Soviet Union, they talk about the similarities. And I mean, in Mao's Cultural Revolution, he had the 5 blacks and the 5 reds, and if you were a black, you want to do everything you could to get on the side of the reds. And it's just so much like intersectionality, where if you're on this side of the wheel, if you're a white, straight Christian, like from middle class, whatever, you're so privileged. But what can you do to become less privileged?
You're the oppressor.
Yeah, oppressor. You can become LGBTQ, and all of a sudden you're a victim. And in reality, the victims have the power in this situation. And so it motivates children to join this side, and then all of a sudden they're like a special person on the intersectional wheel. And it's just very in line with what Mao's Cultural Revolution did with the 5 blacks and the 5 reds. And I think they had the 4 olds, and just all these ways that they were trying to destroy tradition and get children to be against their parents,
snitch on their parents. And you're about Nazi group or whatever, they did the same stuff,
right?
All of this, like this whole trans thing, the LGBTQ agenda as it's pushed by the leaders up top, what I see there is I see they've managed to take the worst parts of religion and the worst parts of communism and marry the two into some ungodly abomination, right? Because it's got all the hallmarks of a religion, right? Look, you can't change your gender. I don't care what anybody says. You can't change it. It's biology. It's science, right? And it doesn't.
And it's spiritual,
Yes, and it's spiritual.
We were before we came to this world.
Yes, it's for us. It's very much spiritual, right? And so you absolutely have to have, and I'm going to use this word not in the context that you and I would use it as Mormons, but it very much is a leap of faith to go, well, I know biologically I'm a guy, but I'm really a girl, right? That is a leap of faith, one that's not grounded in anything, but
Mhm.
nevertheless, it's faith. And then you're absolutely right. All of this stuff is has to work through critical theory, right? It's got to be done from an oppressed oppressor class designation. And if that's the only way it survives. And in today's society where victimization seems to be the currency of choice, it becomes very appealing, right? No longer are the cool kids the ones who played football or were really good at academics. Now the cool kids are the ones who can claim victim status the most. And
Oh,
those up top have figured out how to weaponize that. And
yeah.
it is absolutely frightening. At this point, how has the trial been going? How long have you been going to trial now?
We started in January 2024 because we did a UPEPA hearing, which UPEPA is basically saying that someone is trying to silence you on a matter of public concern. They're using litigation to silence you. And I feel like that law really covered what we were doing. But unfortunately, at the time, I had an attorney. He was just a bad attorney. And he really wanted to argue the First Amendment. He thinks he's like a First Amendment hero. And so he kind of screwed over, he didn't kind of, he 100% screwed over our case on the UPEPA hearing. And then I ended up firing him and hired my current attorney, Gowd Maragani, who's just amazing. And so then we finally went to, I don't know if you call it trial or just the hearing
A hearing.
on like the evidentiary hearing for this whole stalking injunction in January of 2025. And then it was supposed to be one hearing, but it took so long that we ended up having to do two. So our second hearing was just this March of 2025. And we will have the final. It's not a, I don't know, it's not a hearing. It's just for the judge to like ask questions in
Oral
July.
arguments.
Yeah, in July of 2025. And then it should be done. And as far as what I feel about it, like how it's been going, I think, and this is from my perspective, but I think that the truth is obvious. Um, and it really depends on the judge. The problem is that the stalking statute itself is unconstitutional because technically you can stalk someone by talking or posting about them two times. And, I've
And
maintained,
annoying them.
right? Which I'm like, we all annoy people. I guess we're all stalkers and we all talk about like people who affect us. I guess if that is stalking, then we're all stalkers.
Right.
But the the reality, I think the reality is clear. But if the judge decides to just rule according to the letter of the law, the way the stalking statute is written, I could potentially lose, which if that happens, then we'll go to appeals, and who knows how far up this will go. And that's again like putting our faith in God. We're not going to back down at any point.
Yeah, how much is freedom worth?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But as far as how I feel it's been going, I think the truth is obvious. I think my testimony versus her testimony, you can tell which one of us is honest and which one of us is a belligerent liar. And I probably don't know. I don't know if I should put that in there, but you can tell which one of us is honest. And I think I'm not worried about the truth, but it's all in the judge's hands and depends on how she wants to take this.
It's a public hearing, so anybody can go and download or pay for the audio if they
The
wanted to.
testimony,
Yeah.
it actually is laughable. I was on the stand in March and which was just a couple weeks ago, I knew my stuff, and I felt really good about how it went down.
Yeah, it's a lot of times you're like, is this real life?
Yeah, it's
They're
unbelievable.
actually saying this in court. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So you guys are driving from an undisclosed location in Idaho to your um back to Murray whenever you have a court date.
Right. It's in Salt Lake, but yeah, we drive to Salt Lake every time.
Whew. Okay, so look, I know that court costs can be expensive. Attorneys are expensive. Do you guys
Yeah.
have a GoFundMe or something like that that I can direct my folks to if they wanted to help out and contribute?
Yeah, we have a Give Send Go. Like I don't know the exact link, but we can give it to you.
Yeah, if you give that to me, I want to put that in the show notes because here's the thing. a lot of us, we're not directly in the fight, right? We haven't had to deal with it yet. When these things do come up, right? The American judicial system is based off of stare decisis, right? Which basically says this, that other judges don't want to overturn some other judge's decision, right? It takes an extreme amount of evidence to rule in the opposite of that. So, in these sorts of things that kind of set precedent, they're super important, right? Because this will be the norm going forward, right? And that's why it was so hard for a lot of years to overturn Roe v. Wade, right? Was because that was the first time that that case had went up to the Supreme Court, and it took us the better part of 50 years to overturn it, right? So this kind of case is important, and we all have. If your kids go to public school, you got skin in the game, right? You may not feel it right now, but understand that if April and Tony lose this case, they're more emboldened. So it behooves us all to stand with them on this. So send me that link and let me put that in the episode's show notes. Because like, if everybody that I talk to, it's not a huge podcast, but if everybody donated $5, right, it would probably put you over the top of where you needed to be, right? And I feel like this case is important.
Well, at this point, we're $50,000 in the hole. So I
Yeah.
don't know if let's see.
Depends on how many people you
If
get.
you have 10,000, then yeah.
And look, a large chunk of my audience are active LDS card carrying members of the LDS Church, right? So they should have, and look, if you're listening to this podcast, unless you're listening to find out what the enemy's saying, but realistically, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're on kind of the conservative side of the spectrum, right? And so I think I got some people that can help. What else can the audience do to help you out?
What would you say?
I would say don't depend on the leadership of the church to fight your battles. You've got to be an agent unto yourself and speak up in school. If you see something that's not right, you got to be courageous and speak up. And I'm not as good at that as she is, but she's a good example. Just read her posts. You'll understand the issues really well and be able to speak up a lot better.
When's your next court case? When's your next court date?
July 2nd.
Is it open to the public?
It is, yeah.
Maybe we should just flood that place.
That'd be awesome.
You know,
Maybe it's time we just go ahead and put butts and seats in there and just maybe be in there. Maybe it's time that happens. Because this cannot stand, right? This just cannot stand. So yeah.
Well, I want to hear what April, were you going to say something, April, as far as what we can do?
I guess I would say, like, if you see your neighbor taking a stand on something, help them, not just behind the scenes, like get out of your comfort zone, go to school board meetings with them, get in public and have a little faith, because some people are so quick to be like, oh, well, my job or my whatever, or like I'll offend so-and-so, or you know what? Faith means you do something when you're scared to do it. Faith means you do it when it's hard. If it's easy for you, it's not faith. And right. I just, like someone said in Sunday school a while back, like the church leaders might call on us to do some really hard things. And I'm just sitting there like, are you kidding me? The Founding Proclamation was released 30 years ago almost. It's not going to be them calling on us. They already did. The Founding Proclamation says, we call upon responsible citizens everywhere to uphold these values. And that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing. And, I just am like, all the church members who are trying to justify flying pride flags, I'm sorry, unequivocally, you're on the wrong side of this issue. It's in the long run, and even outside because when I first got into this, I had to look at this tried to look at it from an objective perspective. Like, even if I wasn't a member of the church, would I take a stand on these issues? And like, couldn't I couldn't deny that even from an objective perspective, or as objective as I could be, that I would have to take a stand the same that I'm standing now, because under no circumstances is gender ideology helpful to our children or our society. And you don't have to believe in God to see that that's true. You know, it's just a fact. And I just think, regardless of where you are in the church, it's time to step up. It's time not to let one or two people take all the heat. And like my husband said, you shouldn't expect the apostles and the prophet and all your church leaders to do it for you. It's time to get off our own butts. We're the responsible citizens. Get up and speak up and stop being afraid and stop making excuses, because being a real peacemaker means you defend the doctrine that brings peace to society.
Yeah, and I would say, for me, I'm not as quick on my feet with speaking or whatever, but I have other talents that I can use to support people who are good at it. So if I see someone in the school who's running for school board, I'm IT. I can help with a web page, or get the word out somehow. I could drive. I can do other things if I don't have as strong of a talent in speaking or whatever. So, or if you have a lot of money, you could donate money, but there's a lot of things you can do that don't involve having to be like the speaker. There's lots of things we can do.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, guys, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up here?
This matters. This matters to the public. And, that's all we're trying to do, is spread awareness so that the public knows what's going on and that they can take a stand in their spheres of influence, because that's what needs to happen. We all need to be doing that. And, I think that's the way, that's what this is really about. It's not about talking about this stupid psychopath lady, but there's 500 million other people just like her.
Right.
So,
she's just one foot soldier in a larger.
Right.
Yeah.
She just happens to have more money than some of them.
And when this happens to other people, it needs to be exposed. And we appreciate people like you who are willing to, broadcast it and get more people aware.
Like when you said that you're not a member of our church, to me, I don't care. I don't care what church you're a part of. I don't care. Like, even if it was, like, I've told my husband, I would do an interview even with people who hate me, because this is an issue that affects everyone. And whether or not you believe in my religion, it's a religious freedom issue. We should all want religious freedom. Yeah. And I'm not afraid to be interviewed by anyone from any side, because I think truth holds its ground. And all I'm doing is speaking the truth. So,
Absolutely. Well, and here's the other thing I've said about religion, right? And look, I'm a guy who doesn't have any members of the church on either side of his family. I came into this thing so cold. And the thing that drew me to the gospel was this idea of, okay, you know what? Here's the truth, right? And it doesn't change, and it's unwavering, and it's constant, and you can hitch your wagon to it. And at some point, this idea that these sorts of things, these fundamental principles, right? Gender, it doesn't change, right? It doesn't. God doesn't make mistakes when he creates his children. Right. And this idea that it does, it kind of, you kind of paint God as less than what he is, right? What you're saying is that God makes mistakes. Well, I have no time or inclination to follow a God that does make mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. If I wanted to do that, I would just get into politics. And so, yeah, I really have no time for that sort of thing. And it's rough stuff. I get it, you guys. You guys have been through the ringer, but I appreciate you standing up. And like I said, we'll see if we can't garner some support, even if we have to shelve this episode. I think there's other things I can do to get your story out front, and then see if we can't get you some help, both financially and just some overall support. Awesome. All right, guys. You guys are great. You're rock stars. Keep me informed. Let me know how it's going.
Okay, we will.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks for having us on.
April,
And
Tony, it was sure good to meet you, and I think you guys are amazing.
yeah, well, thank
Thank
you
you
for having
too.
us on. We really appreciate all you're doing to help us out. It's
No
great.
sweat.